Oh, okay. Hi everyone. Welcome to the podcast, or not podcast, sorry, interview. Pasta Salt interview. This is June Her. She's the author of Silence of Bones, The Forest of Stolen Girls, and I don't know if it's out yet, but it's coming out. The Red Palettes. Yeah. In, oh, so soon. Uh, so if you guys would like to know more about that, her website's on the or it's been linked, so you guys can check that out. Um, yeah, we're just gonna start the interview. Um, so actually, like I didn't write this question, but like I want to ask, because it says like when people are like critically acclaimed author or um, like I don't know, best-selling novelist, like how is that determined? Like how does that, yeah. Oh wait. There's no sound. Oh, hold on. Oh yeah.
Okay,
Okay,
you hear
now
me?
okay, yeah.
Okay, awesome. All right, I'll put the mic a bit higher. So with New York Times, there's a list, and so every week there's a list, and bestsellers hit that list, and then once you hit it once, you're a New York Times bestselling author forever. Like
Oh,
even if your next book doesn't hit the list, you're still a New York Times bestselling
but
author.
how do you get to that list?
Um, it's all right. So like apparently it's kind of curated the New York Times bestseller, so you still need to sell a large amount of books, but your publisher does all the marketing. And then the New York Times chooses which books make it onto the list. So no one really knows how you make it on. It's like mysterious. Yeah, but everyone wants to be on the list. And then
Yeah.
there's other ways to become bestsellers. Like there's USA Today bestseller and like Sunday Times bestseller or something like that. There's like different types. And anything other than New York Times, usually it's just called like best-selling author or like
Mm.
yeah, I don't know too much about it. And for critically acclaimed, it's like for me too. Like my editor was like, "Oh, you're critically acclaimed." I'm like, "I am." Like by what standard? But she said, so basically, my book was chosen by like the American Bookseller Association as like the top winter debuts or something like that. And then so because
Oh.
it was selected, apparently I'm critically acclaimed, but
Oh.
it's just uh interesting title. I'm like, oh,
It's a
okay.
pretty
I
epic
don't
title. I
relate
don't know
to it. I
about
don't relate
that.
to it.
Imagine if the Bible is just on the type on the cover. It's like critically acclaimed
Seriously.
authors,
Oh my
Saul,
god. That's actually really funny.
best selling. Oh man. So I don't know, how do you want to like take us through your novel career and like how which like authors influenced you or like how you
Sure.
developed your writing style?
Hmm. So so when I was young, like middle school, I actually really sucked at English, and then my dad got really worried, and he's like, "Oh my gosh!" And so he'd always buy me books, trying to get me to love books, but I'd always be like, "Ah, so boring." But then finally, I fell in love with Jane Austen's Pride and Prejudice,
Mm.
and then I began writing sequels, like fan fiction of Pride and Prejudice, and then from there, I just like I fell in love with Charlotte Bronte's Jane Eyre. So a lot of like regions like 18th century, 19th century
Like
British
historical
classics.
fictions.
Yeah, historical. Like I devoured those, and so my writing was really influenced by that like historical fiction vibe.
Mm.
Um, and I also wrote like in anime fan fiction as well. So yeah, fan fiction got me into writing, and then I started to like really enjoy receiving like interacting with readers, and I realized at one point in my life like I'm not good at anything else but writing. So I'm like, okay, let me try pursuing writing as a career. So I started at first with by writing British historicals because I love Jane Austen, and
Mm.
so I wanted to write. I thought British historicals were the only kind of books I could write. So I pursued that for like 10 years, trying to get it published. Nothing worked out. And then finally I burnt out, and I'm like, oh my gosh, like I should try looking into other histories that I want to write about because I'm a history nerd. and I love history. So I looked into like different world histories, but I couldn't really relate to it. But I also knew that because I'm not born in that country, like it's hard to understand a different history enough to write about it. So like I looked into US history, but I'm like, oh, I don't know anything. I tried looking to Canadian history and I was like, oh my gosh, like I lived in Canada most of my life, but it's still very like I just couldn't connect to Canadian history. And then finally I'm like, oh okay, I'll look into Korean history a bit since I'm Korean and I don't know much about Korea's past that much.
Hmm.
But I've watched Korean dramas like sageuk, historical Korean dramas
Mm.
growing up. And I was like, okay, I like those. Like maybe I'll be interested in Korean history. And so I looked into Korean history and I went like I fell in love with Korea's
Mm.
past. And it's weird because um like growing up as an immigrant, I always thought, my family's value is unique to them, and we are this lone island, floating in the middle of nowhere in Canada.
Mm.
But when I started looking into Korea's past, I'm like, oh, like my family values were very much influenced by Korean tradition, and the more I studied about Korea, I felt like I recognize that a lot of who I am is also influenced by Korea, and I'm not just like this separate entity as an immigrant. And so that's what inspired me to write Korean historical fiction. So my books are kind of like my love letter to Korean history.
Wow, that's awesome. So like going back, you said you did anime fanfics.
Yeah.
Could we find that online somewhere?
Oh, you could. It's really bad. Like I did Inuyasha fan fiction. I think I did one card captor, but mostly Inuyasha fan fiction. Like I tried reading it and I was like, oh my gosh, it's so bad.
Oh man, that's so funny. So I actually am not very good at reading Korean. It's like it'll take me so long to read it,
Hmm.
so I don't read it. Like sometimes I read like webtoons, but like
Hmm.
it'll take me forever. So
Mm.
but I know my talk to my friend who loves to read Korean
Mm.
over English,
Hmm.
and she said because she felt like the Korean text was like way more colorful and more
Mm.
um like just sounds has more way more like I don't know descriptions, and she
Yeah.
felt like she loved Korean
Mm.
like text way more. So I
Mhm.
know you grew up in high school in Canada, right?
Yeah, so I was born in Korea and then I left Korea when I was like really young, probably like a toddler. No, not a
Mm.
toddler, like maybe kindergarten. And then I grew up in like US and Canada. And then in high school, I went back to Korea and stayed there for like 3 years and then came back.
Yeah, it's like is your Korean like I don't know writing skills like up to par or
Mm,
like
no, like it was adequate. And then when I began writing Korean historicals, I had to really brush it up as I had to read
mm,
a lot of Korean sources. So I think and then I talk with my parents in Konglish. So it's like a mix of Korean and English, and they talk to me all in Korean. So like my communication skill is okay. My reading is like, it's acceptable, but my writing is not that great.
oh yeah,
Yeah.
because I was going to ask you like because a lot of Korean books have a lot of onomatopoeias, and I
Yeah.
noticed in your books you use that to some of them too, and
Hmm.
like I was wondering if like in comparison like do you feel like maybe the English language is limiting compared to the
Mm.
English?
Yeah, I think I've always felt that in a sense where it's like, oh, like there's some Korean words that you can never really quite accurately describe in English. Like, oh, 느끼하다. Like, how do you
Mm.
describe like, oh, it's oily? But yeah, it still doesn't have that same it doesn't capture what the Korean language is able to express.
Mm-hmm.
But I think because I grew up mostly in Canada and I was immersed in English language books. So I'm not able to really compare the difference. I'm not able to see what I'm missing out on.
Mm.
But that's my dream, like one day to be really good at Korean enough to just be like, okay, I'm just gonna pick up a Korean fiction and just read it for fun. And it's not gonna be like a labor.
Right, right.
Yeah.
So I know like some novelists like what's it called? Like they start off on like web online novels,
Mhm.
like publishing chapter by chapter. Like what made you like decide to like go for like a full novel complete and then like send it off versus like start online, get some
Yeah.
following, and then like publish it?
Yes. So I kind of that's what back in my time. I don't so web novel back then, like what was popular here was is called like fictionpress.com. So I did publish some of my historicals on there. And then there was this one book I published um, online that I ended up trying to get published like traditionally through a publishing house. So yeah, I began online,
Mm.
but then I ended up pursuing traditional publishing. So like basically getting my book into bookstores and libraries because I'm like, I need a job. So I'm like, yeah, it's the one that I know will pay me for sure. And I feel like web novels, I'm sure somehow you can make a career off of it. I don't know how. Uh, but I think but there's like things like self-publishing and stuff. But I think you need to have the energy to do that, to be like really good at marketing and stuff like that.
Mm.
But I'm not really, so I chose a different route.
Oh. So it's more of a practical choice than
Yeah, yeah.
so like you're talking about like how you need a job. Were you like not working at all during this like I don't know pursuit
Oh,
of like publishing?
so basically, my parents said you can pursue publishing all you want as long as you can like feed yourself and like not die of starvation. So
Uh-huh.
I worked at the library on the side for the
Oh.
longest time. So that it was just a part-time job, and that allowed me enough time to write on the side. But like I did reach a point like in around 2016 where I'm like, okay, I might not get published and I have to be okay with that. And so like I tried like and so I tried different positions in the library and I came to really appreciate the library more. But it worked out in the end with publishing. So yeah.
Was that like I don't know, point of surrendering to God at that point?
Mm. So I think up until 2016ish, like somehow I got convinced that like yes, God has given me the love of writing, but I think that passion became almost like idolatry. Like it came to define me. Like if I don't get published, I'm a nobody and I need to get
Mm.
published to prove myself and stuff like that. But when it suddenly occurred to me that oh, I might not get published and you know, like this is like it's I I don't know. It might come off weird, but like I thought like getting my book published was my great calling and it's going to change the world and stuff like that. But I think when I realized, oh, I might not get published, it was a really humbling moment when I was like, okay, this is like, it's not my place to like assume that I know how God is going to work in my life. Like maybe I'll get published or maybe I'll tell stories in different ways. And it's also my role as a Christian to sow seeds, not to be like, I'm not God, I'm not going to change the world. And I shouldn't want that.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so I think after that, yeah, I surrendered that dream of mine. And I still struggle to this day with like idolizing my writing and like, and yeah, it's a constant struggle. But yeah, I think hitting that moment made me realize um, just to put my writing in God's hand. And it's like, use it as you want, and I'll keep writing because I love writing, but I'm not going to be so obsessed with the outcome of what my book does.
Mm. What so like I guess on that like do you like really try to like incorporate like your Christian faith into your writing or like maybe by introducing because I know in your first book you introduce like the well because of the era like the Catholic
Mm-hmm.
people
Mm-hmm.
and or like do you just like try to like weave it into like an overall story building like how C.S. Lewis or like J.R.
Mm-hmm.
Tolkien did?
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, so I think because I focus on my market as like I want to write for like both Christians and non-Christians. So I'm totally okay with people writing Christian books, but for me, I think my books focus on more like like there are things in Christianity that can be universal, like things like kindness, compassion, grace, mercy. They're things that even non-Christians can understand and appreciate. And so I take things that I appreciate personally about who God is, and I kind of thread it through as a theme in my book. So it's never, so even in my first book, there are Catholics, but I never kind of take the stance of saying, oh, the Catholics are better than, the more traditional Korean believing people. So I don't pit anyone against each other. I don't make claims that, that I don't know, like, because back then when Christianity came in, um, it did cause issues, like, any kind of, foreign belief coming into a country, it does cause a bit of chaos. So I don't take the stance that they were right or wrong. What I want to do as someone who loves history is just capture the moment of what happened as accurately as possible without taking sides, without trying to be too biased. Um, so yeah, I think I just try to be as um, just like to make it open enough for people to enjoy whatever faith they are from.
That's awesome. So on that, like, how do you choose like the era that you want to write in?
Mm-hmm.
Like, do you just arbitrarily choose it, or like, oh, like, what's like, oh, maybe like you'll get away with murder easily on this era? Like, how do you choose an era?
So that there's some of that, like, oh, where's the best event where a really interesting crime can occur? There's that. Another part is as someone who's learning Korean history with interest for the first time in my life. Like I wasn't interested in Korean history until like my late 20s. And so for me, I choose the period based on where my interest is, where so it's like if I'm like, researching for one book and I'm like, oh, like this is really interesting, I want to learn more about it, then I base my second book on that to give me an excuse to research.
Mm. Do you have like a specific era that you like the most?
The Chosun period. So I think that was like 14th century, like 13 something up until like 1910 or something.
This is
Or late
when all of
century.
Korea has been united, right?
Yeah. I like that period mainly because the resources are most accessible, and the
Mm.
further back you go in Korea's dynastic period, I just find it's harder to find information.
Mm. Uh, I know you went to like Korea to Jeju-do for like
Mhm.
information finding and stuff. Have you ever like talked to like a historian in Korea?
Like so I talked with one person about this, like, but she's really connected to Korean historians. Um, but yeah, like I've tried reaching out to them, but because I don't write in Korean, like they don't respond to me.
Uh,
And then yeah, like I need to, like I know they're out there, and I got their contact information. It's just I'm such a hermit and I'm really shy. So I'm like, oh, it's like so draining for me to reach out to people and socialize. So I'm just like,
mm-hmm.
I really want to do this, but I'm like, oh, I don't. But at the same time, I'm like, oh, I'm so tired, like mom and stuff. So I'm like, I don't know. But yeah,
Yeah.
I really need to get on that.
Um,
I just read their works for now.
that's good. Like I heard like some mystery authors like to start their story from like the end of their novel, where like,
Mm-hmm.
oh, I know who the murderer is,
Yeah.
and like, and then they kind of work backwards. Like,
Mm-hmm.
how do you like start your mystery novels? Like,
So so I do always start at the end. I need to figure out who the killer is and the motive, and then I figure out all the clues that might lead up to the reveal. Um, and then once all that is set, I kind of just write a plot around it. But then as I'm writing, usually the killer changes because like, I'm writing and I'm getting to know all the characters. I'm like, oh wait, like this other character has way more a motive that's way more interesting than what my initial killer was. And so
mm-hmm.
I'll switch, but then I'll keep running. I'm like, oh wait. And then I'll keep like switching. And then at one point I'll be like, I don't know who the killer is. And so everyone seems suspicious. All the characters seem suspicious. And then it's in the next towards like the second or third draft, that's when I polish things up and I'll choose one killer, stick to it, and line up all the evidence and clues and stuff like that.
Oh, that's interesting. That's so funny how like you don't even know yourself. You're
I'm like,
just like,
oh,
oh,
yeah,
what is this? It's like you're reading your own novel.
yeah.
Let's see. So I noticed like you were saying like you kind of like in your novel, like I noticed like you're like juggling words between like Korean and English. Like how do
Mm-hmm.
you choose when to use Korean or when to use English? Like instead of saying
Mm-hmm.
yes, you say
Mm-hmm.
ne, and
Mm-hmm.
why like vice versa? Like why did you choose
Mm.
which?
That's a good question. So for example, the yes, I say ne because if you say if for example a lower class character says yes to a noble, like an aristocrat in Korea, it just feels off because in Korea there's like, there's like the panmal, which is like
Mm-hmm.
the language you use to your equal, and then there's the 존댓말, which is like the more,
Formal language.
yeah, formal. Yeah, they don't have that in English. And so when there's that kind of language difference I really want to capture, then
Mm-hmm.
I switch over to Korean. And at other times, like if there's this one word that can't be really captured in English, I use the Korean equivalent. So, for example, the word han, in Korean, it just means like, so if I translate han into English, it means like anger, regret, helplessness, anguish. And it's just like all these words that one Korean word can capture so well. And so that's when I choose Korean words over English words.
Mm. I know I was reading your blogs and you're like mentioning like how you're bringing like your own personal experience to like bring life into your novels.
Mhm.
Like, do you would you like try going outside that and like writing in like a male perspective
Mhm.
or like maybe even trying Canadian history?
So for the male perspective,
Yeah.
like I am trying that with my current project. So my fourth book, I'm
Spoilers.
trying the male, yeah, I'm trying a male perspective voice, and it's hard because I'm so used to the female eye. Um, it's hard, but I like the challenge. And I find that, I still really enjoy taking things from my own personal experience, but I think that experience can be used also in the male perspective point of view. For example, like things like fear, it can be experienced both by a man and a woman. And so I just take what I feel and I ask myself, like, does this work in his storyline? And then I just draw from my own personal experience. It's never exactly like my personal experience. It's like
Mm-hmm.
my experience, but make it more dramatic. Yeah. And then Canadian history, uh, I considered it when I was first wondering, like, oh, like what should I write about? But then I don't know, I just don't feel like I studied Canadian history as well, but I don't feel much like my imagination just doesn't come alive with Canadian history. And I think with all that's going on with like the things that Indigenous people have gone through, it's just like it just feels like a minefield, and I'm like I don't want to touch it right now.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. I think it's such a because as like Christians and it's such a
I
like
know.
sensitive topic.
Yeah.
But like I think it's so important to like
Hmm.
bring awareness to it.
Yeah, for sure.
Let's see. Oh, uh, World's Chilliest Kids asks, who are some authors that inspire you and you which works like you enjoy?
Mm. So before I was in university, I really loved historical fiction. And I love the classics like Jane Austen, as I mentioned, Charlotte Bronte, all the, yeah, I loved British fiction. But then after university, like just something happened with my brain where I'm just like, oh my gosh, it, because I studied literature, I'm like, oh, I was so tired of fiction, even though I
Hmm.
write fiction. But when it comes to reading fiction, it was just so hard to immerse myself in it.
Oh.
And I came to really enjoy memoirs.
Mm.
So one of my most favorite author of a memoir is Janet Walls, and she wrote The Glass Castle, and that book is so good. It's
Mm.
about dysfunctional family, but also family love, and I just love how authors like her are able to capture the just the tension and pain of what it means to be part of a family. So authors like her really inspire me.
Oh, that's really awesome. I personally am like solely reading fantasy and sci-fi novels.
Oh, nice. I want to get into fantasy, but it's just like it's over my head. I'm like
Yeah.
reading high fantasy. I'm like, I don't understand.
I mean, it's like a completely different jargon of
Yeah,
words, right?
yeah.
Yeah. Okay. There's, I guess we're kind of going sideways. I guess does as an oh shit, as an author, like, do you find that it helps you to understand the Bible better and like how it's
Mm.
written, like understanding like and noticing literary techniques that was used in the Bible? Um,
Um, not. I've always kind of sucked at literary techniques. Like I use it, but I don't. I don't always understand what I'm doing. It's just I'm so used to it from like reading books. I'm like, okay, like I'm using a literary technique, but I don't realize that I'm doing that. But I think as an author, as someone who loves writing, and I understand there's usually a deeper meaning behind the words that we put on the page. And so when I read the Bible, for example, like it's not enough for me to just be like, okay, like these are the words on the page. Like I want to understand it. And so usually I always look at commentaries to really delve deep into the words. And also like the Bible is translated, so it's like is this the actual word, or like is there way more in like the Hebrew language or the Greek?
mm-hmm.
And so I'll look at what commentators say, and then based on that, like I feel like I have a deeper appreciation for the Bible. But obviously like you don't have to do that. But that's just how my brain is wired. Like I need to know the the in between the lines kind of thing to really understand and appreciate the word.
Mm. Rose Chili's Kids has another question. He says, have you ever had writer's block? And if you have, in what ways did you try to overcome it?
So, all right, once I had a baby, I was able to really understand the cause of my writer's block. Um, because before, when I didn't have a child, like I had so much time. And so when I have writer's block, it's just like, oh, like I don't know what's going on. I just can't put down the words, and I'll just kind of wallow in the writer's block and be like, oh, I don't know what to do. But once I had a once I became a mom, I'm like, I literally don't have time to just wallow. I need to figure out what's going on and fix it fast.
Mm.
Um, and what I realized is that writer's block comes down to a few things. One, it could be I'm burnt out. It could mean that I just overworked myself and I just need to rest. And when I rest, I'll just, watch TV, read a book, anything to inspire me later on. The second one is that perhaps there's something in the story that just isn't working, and I'm reluctant to write because I'm just like, oh, like the story just doesn't feel right. I don't like where it's going.
Mm.
And if that's the case, it means I just have to just really commit to figuring out where I went wrong in the story and then untangling that. And then once I do, the excitement to write returns again. So usually for me, it's two things. And I noticed that's the case for some other writers as well.
You had you I know you like originally started off writing like a romance novel, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like do you ever like consider like I don't know, combining the two genres like mystery and romance or like
Yeah.
just like trying different genres altogether?
Yeah. So my the first book that I tried to get published that didn't get published was like initially a romance, but then I turned it into historical fiction. Um, and I think during that transition, I just like grew so tired of romance because I kept getting rejected, and so I think I just convinced myself that I'm not good at romance. Um, but then when I was writing my like upcoming book, The Red Palace, I did add like a hint of romance into the book, like to kind of like see whether I'm still okay at it. But I realized I really enjoyed writing romance. I was like, oh my gosh, like I can't believe I like kept this out of the books. Like this is so fun, and I had so much fun writing it. And so I feel a bit more confident enough to write like a stronger romance theme in my next book. Um, but yeah, at the same time, yeah, I don't know, like my idea of romance has changed over the years. And I'm just like, I don't know. Like I'll always write a hint of it, but I don't think it'll take center stage.
Mm. Because I remember like reading like comments from like the good book review. What is it called?
Yeah.
Like I was like, they're like, oh, is there a romance? And they're like, no, no romance.
It's always the question, is there
Yeah.
romance? Is there romance?
I think like in most like even with like I don't know, it's kind of like going a tangent, but like even like in Disney and stuff, like oh
Yeah.
Moana, it was
Yeah.
like oh no like Disney princess, no romance, like what's going
Yeah,
on?
exactly.
Yeah, but I think it's awesome that it's just like doesn't have to always have
Exactly.
romance.
Yeah, I don't think so. Like sometimes my heroines are too busy solving a crime. And I'm
Hmm.
like, there's just no time to fall for a guy when you're solving a murder mystery sometimes.
Yeah. Let's see. Sorry. Oh, it says, has your faith journey changed or affected the way you write or plan to write in your future?
um, so my faith has been affected in the sense that I'm aware that like my greatest strength, which is like my greatest strength, which is like my imagination and telling a story, is also my greatest weakness, where like all I want to do sometimes is just write. And so it'll come at the detriment of my own faith, where it'll be like, do you want to read the Bible or do you want to write? And I'll be, I want to write. Um, and when I have that imbalance, I end up becoming what I'm able to produce. And I end up becoming like a workaholic, and I define myself by what I produce and how successful my books are. Um, so I realize that's something I really, really struggle with. And I don't think this struggle will ever go away. And so I've learned that I really need to learn how to Sabbath well. So I'm trying really hard to not work on the weekends, especially on Sundays. Um, and I see Sabbath as my way of reminding myself that I'm not my work, I'm God's child, and I let the Sabbath really ground me and give me perspective again of who I am, so I could go out on the weekdays again and battle through the whole identity thing. But yeah, it's a struggle, but I think, yeah, hopefully it gets easier one day.
Well, I know it took like 8 years to like publish your first book, and
Mm-hmm.
like the sequel, six or sequential books seem to be coming out like within the years. Like, do you, is it easier to write or is it just like how is that working?
So the thing with publishing is that they have this kind of like they have, it's not like a system, but it's like their ideal pace that an author publishes book is once a year. Um, and so that's the schedule that I kind of fell into through contracts and stuff. So it's not easier, but I find that because I wrote one book and published it, I gain the tools that that make it not easier, but like I'm able to produce faster. And I've come to know myself as a writer a bit more, and so it makes writing faster a bit easier as well. So it's not easier. I think it's easier when I had 8 years to write, because I could always like write and then edit and then just go at my own pace. But once you're under a deadline, it's like, yeah, it's deadlines are really stressful, and that really pushes me to write as fast as I can. But yeah, like I'm hoping to one day slow down a bit.
Do you think deadlines kind of like also like I don't know, maybe rush your book and make it
Yeah.
worse sometimes?
Yeah, I feel like it does force me to rush. I don't I still feel like I'm producing my best
Mm.
work after each book because I'm learning so because I think once I'm under a deadline I have to be very efficient, and so it's forcing me to learn the craft better. So I feel like I know more about how a book should be structured now because I don't have time to waste.
Mm.
But at the same time I do wonder sometimes, I'm like, oh, like if I had 8 years to work on this book, like would it be a masterpiece? Like would it be the most amazing thing ever?
I mean,
But at the same time it's like maybe not, like maybe it'll be the same thing but just like way wordier, like maybe
yeah.
it'll be the same quality but like 800 pages longer, so I don't know.
I mean, that's with Martin, right? What's his name?
Yeah, yeah,
J.M.
he's spending a
Martin.
long time.
Yeah, it's like 10 years between each book. Like,
Yeah.
but his following is still very loyal to
Hmm.
wait.
Hmm.
Um, let's see. Uh, what are some challenges now that you have a daughter to take care of, and if you have, if and if and how has that affected your writing routine? Do you
Mm.
have a daily routine when it comes to working? That's what Will Chili could ask.
Mm. So having a daughter has just like kind of taught me the importance of taking breaks and being present. Because I think before her, like even if I'm not writing, I'm thinking about writing all day long, and so I'm not really present. But she's taught me that I need to learn to be present as a mom, and she's definitely changed my writing routine. Like before, I would spend literally just like morning till night writing because I worked part time, so I didn't really go out of the house that much.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and there was one time I just spent 3 days straight at home writing, and then it gave me cabin fever. So that was pretty bad. But having a kid has really taught me to be efficient with my time. So the work I'd produce, like, so like before I had a baby, I'd spend like the whole day writing, and I wouldn't produce that much. But after a baby, I've become so much more efficient. And so like in 2 hours, I could do the same amount that I would have done in like a whole day.
Yeah. It sounds like you're getting better and better.
Yeah, I hope so.
So I guess with your second child, it'll be 1 hour.
The thing is, I
Or
also have in-laws.
oh,
In-law,
okay.
my husband's parent like really helps me, and I think if not for them, I'd be much slower. So it's not all me.
Awesome. I think. Do you have any like advice for people who would like to pursue a writing career?
My advice would be finish writing the book. And the next important advice is find critique partners. So, like a circle of trusted fellow writers that you can exchange your work with. And so they look through yours and offer critiques, and you offer critiques for them. And I find that that kind of friendship goes a long way, and it really strengthens you as a writer.
Mm. Bosco asks, do you play any games or what games are you playing?
Oh, I used to play Stardew Valley, and then I overworked myself. I worked too hard.
And then he follows up with, how do uh how do games help with your writing or mom life?
It Oh yeah, it shows me what fun can be in different ways. Like playing Stardew taught me, oh, like this is what village life must feel like, kind of. Like not really, but yeah.
Is Stardew like your like main go-to game?
Yeah. I only play Stardew. Like my husband tries to make me play other games, but I'm like, no. I'm committed to one and I'm gonna stay in one.
Have you tried other games that are similar to Stardew?
Like I heard of Animal Crossing, but I'm just like, no. I'm like the person where it's like if I get comfortable with one thing, I'll just stick to it forever.
Concerned Nate must be so proud of his game. Um, sorry, I'm just last glance on my list.
I should tell, like, I think Bosco's watching this, but Johanna is crying.
Yeah. Oh no. uh,
Here I'm walking off now.
yeah, I think that's the end. Do you have any like I guess last thoughts or things you'd like to share about like maybe the things you're working on or like promoting your own things or maybe how people can get in contact with you if they're interested or
Yeah. So I have another book coming out in January, and it's called The Red Palace. And I have another book, but it's way off in 2023. So yeah, it's far away. And if you want to reach out to me, like I'd love to hear from you. And I'm always on Twitter, so that's at writer June Her, and on Instagram at June H Writes.
okay, so I have one more question. How do
Mhm.
you name your books? Like, I feel
Oh
like naming is so
yeah,
difficult.
yeah, it is. So my first book is The Silence of Bones, but the original title was like 10,000 Rivers. But then my publishing team, the marketing team, was like, oh, like it's a nice title, but they wanted something that had more of a thriller vibe because they really wanted to establish me more as a thriller writer. And so they wanted me to come up with like a creepier name. And so I was working at the library back then, so I'd like read like all the title of movies and like the title of songs, and I'd look out for words that really stand out to me. And the words that stood out was like silence and bones. And so I'm like,
Mm.
how do I, move it around so it actually makes sense? So it became The Science of Bones. And then the second book, my editor kind of pitched the title to me because it's about forest and missing girls. So she's like, how about The Forest of Missing Girls? So that was her idea. And The Red Palace was like, I just needed a title really quick to add as a title of my document.
Mm.
So I'm just like, okay, the Red Palace, because it's like blood in the palace, whatever. And they're like, okay, we like this title. This is the official title. I'm like, oh, okay. Yeah.
That's so funny. Uh, yeah, I'm excited to
Thank
see
you.
all your other books too. Yeah, I do like historical fiction. It's definitely my third favorite genre.
Yay.
So I'm excited to finish reading the book I picked up from you and
Thank you so
yeah.
much for reading.
Yeah, no, it's awesome. It's really interesting. Um yeah, I guess thank you so much for the interview and joining us. And yeah, thanks guys. I guess that's it. So I don't know. I don't have a really good outro.
That's a good
uh,
outro.
yeah. Thank you, everybody.
You.
Okay. Okay. Bye.
Bye.
Um, oh, oh, that doesn't look good. Hold on. Okay. Sorry, you can't see my face, but thank you guys for watching. We are gonna have a podcast, Pass the Salt podcast next month. The topic is to be determined. We'll be letting you guys know soon. If you guys have any suggestions for who you guys would like us to interview and get in contact with, let us know. And we will be coming out with a big like change in our the way we stream and the way we uh, do things with like a bunch of changes coming up uh, within like next month, I hope. And so just stick around, stay tuned to the announcements and our Instagram, or like our socials, and yeah. But in the meantime, we will still be running our podcast and interviews. So thank you for everyone that joined, and for anyone that sees this on YouTube, like yeah, find us on Discord and on our website. And yeah, DM us if you guys have any questions. Thank you guys. Oh wait, I had forgot to ask June to pray for us. No. I will pray for us. My bad. Oh, I knew I forgot something. Oh, man, okay. I will pray for us too, and um, thank you, God, for this interview. It was really fun, learning a lot of new things. I'm sad that I missed the opportunity to hear June pray, but um, yeah, thank you that she came on, and I hope that a lot of people learn, and maybe there's inspiring authors out there that will learn from June. And I pray, Lord, that you'll give June um, the wisdom to help her uh, live a good, balanced life of Sabbath and childcare and writing. And I pray for yeah, I pray for thanks, and I think that's it. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen. All right. Thank you guys for joining. See you guys. Bye.